I became disabled in October of 2017, and so I decided to move out to my family's cabin property that we've owned since 1957 in Etna, California. And when I got here, it was nothing but problems with the neighbors. They had blocked the road, so I couldn't move any of my belongings up to our cabin. Also, the cabin was burglarized and vandalized. It was ransacked and sabotaged, and they threw a dead animal in our well. And then later the cabin was burned to the ground, and then a second fire was started on the property, a brush fire. 6 months later, seemed to be targeting my RV trailer and my quad. So with all of the problems that I had to start going to the courthouse and looking for documents and try to figure out what was going on with this property and all the surrounding properties, why I was having all these problems with the neighbors. So here's some of the documents that I discovered. So this is the document where Alfonso Fugastaller gave the property to my mother in 1957. There was no easement in the deed at that time. They had promised to give us one if Al had ever died. So here in the executrix's deed, his daughter kind of finalized everything and created an easement for us. All of these documents, by the way, are court certified. You can see their embossed stamp on them. And then this is the document where my mother had left the cabin property to my brother and my sister and I when she died in 1992. So here it shows the cabin property description and then our easement here that gave us rights to cross over lands in section 27, which is now owned by Don Phelps. And because this document is signed by a judge, the sheriff's department should enforce it, although there was already an instance where they did not, and I was not allowed to get onto my own property. This grant deed is Deppin's original deed. He's in section 22, and you can see here on the second page that there is our easement, and it even mentions my mother's name, the Sue Farnsworth property. But he didn't want to honor our easement because apparently he's spiteful and was in some type of argument with other parties and decided to kind of screw us over, even though we weren't involved. I don't quite get it, but he's not a very nice person. So he concocted this correctory deed, or corrective deed is the proper term. And in this deed, he removed our easement clause, so it's no longer there. And then he used this document to convince the sheriff's department that we didn't have an easement over his property, which we clearly do. And Deppin later filed 5 documents in the courthouse, including this one in 2008. And all of those documents also show our easement in the property description. So because he can't remove an easement without an expensive trial, a court process, he decided to use a fraudulent corrective deed to remove the easement instead. And I have received correspondence between him and the sellers of the property, the people who sold the property to him, which was the Corey family or Corey sisters. And he asked them to sign a new document. So he concocted a lie saying that he couldn't close escrow on the property until he cleared up these defects, which was all a lie. He had closed escrow 4 years prior to that, but he convinced these elderly sisters who were on their deathbed that they needed to sign a new quitclaim deed. So Deppen had contacted the elderly Corey sisters and asked them to sign a quitclaim deed, and then either he realized or maybe his attorney told him that a corrective deed or a quitclaim deed couldn't be used because the Corey sisters had already conveyed interest in the property. They no longer had any interest in the property to convey with the quitclaim deed. And so they came up with this solution instead, using a corrective deed, which is only supposed to be used to correct misspellings and things of that nature, errors in the document. It's not intended to change the terms of the agreement. So that was a fraud to use that document the way he did. And then I, at great expense, had this survey done of the road crossing over the 3 different neighbors' properties to get to our property. And so this also was filed in the courthouse. But I'm still having continued problems with the neighbors, including one of them, Don Phelps, pulling a gun on associates of mine and then actually firing his gun on me.